Hey, this is Dan Harris. I am a fidgety, skeptical newsman who had a panic attack live on Good Morning America. That led me to something I always thought was ridiculous: meditation. I wrote a book about it called 10% Happier, started an app, and now I'm launching this podcast to try to figure out whether there's anything beyond 10%. Basically, here's what I'm obsessed with. Can you be an ambitious person and still strive for enlightenment, whatever that means? When I learned that my next guest was a meditator, I was surprised in a very, very pleasant way. It's RuPaul. He is easily the world's most famous drag queen. He's been a household name since the 1990s. And as I've discovered in researching him and reading his autobiography, reading his interviews, and watching his reality competition show, which airs on Logo and is called RuPaul's Drag Race, he is an extremely thoughtful person about the mind and, for lack of a better word, spirituality. So, RuPaul, great to meet you. Thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.
Podcast listeners, you may notice a lot of background noise. That's because we are in RuPaul's pop-up shop in a mall in Los Angeles, which is filled with RuPaul chocolate, which is delicious, and a lot of his gorgeous gowns and T-shirts, et cetera, et cetera. So just in case you're wondering about the background noise, that's why that is. Here's the question I ask everybody first. When and how and why did you start meditating?
I understood at a very early age that this realm that we see with our eyes and we see on television isn't the only one. I learned that early on, and we talked earlier about this. I was about 14. Usually these happenings in a human's life happen at 7, 14, 21, 28, which is a huge one, and then so on and so forth. But about 14 was a real breakthrough for me. I understood that this wasn't all there was, and I wanted to understand what that was. My first which drove me into hallucinogenics, is when I first started finding that. I thought, okay, and I got to tell you.
You were taking acid?
Yes.
At 14?
Yes.
Really?
No, not at 14. Actually, 21 is when I started taking acid.
I see.
At 14, I started doing pills and smoking weed. I was actually smoking weed when I was 10 years old.
Wow. Where were your parents?
Good question. Where were they? Actually, mother and father split up when I was 7, and my mother sort of stayed in her room for about 2 years. So for those 2 years, she was just in her own place,
I see.
and we didn't see her. She was doing her thing. She was heartbroken. We were left to ourselves, my sisters and I. And that's where I first went. So when sort of entry level into other realms is through street drugs.
What do you mean by other realms?
Other realms. This table we're leaning on looks like it's solid, but it's actually not. It's energy vibrating at a high rate.
If you go to a quantum physics level.
Sure.
But
But just because your eyes, when a plane takes off into the horizon, it looks like the plane is getting smaller and smaller. Is the plane getting smaller?
Nope.
No, it's just from where you're standing. So I understood that from the perspective I had at 14 was limited. I understood that. And so that was my first introduction into understanding there were other realms.
You were a pretty deep 14-year-old. I mean, I was playing video games and trying to get girls to kiss me at 14.
Well, I think that, if you've been through a lot of trauma, if your heart has been broken by the world and you understand that the world is a hoax and an illusion, you have to seek something. You become a seeker. And you are looking for something, and that's what I found. And honestly, you don't have to look far to find this information. It's not that so far beyond our comprehension, even at 14.
When you talk about trauma, are you talking about the acrimonious divorce of your parents, or being a gay kid in a world that was not as accepting as the world is now to LGBT?
All of the above. The gay thing is probably the smallest part of that equation. It was the parents, and it was also the world. I actually gave the keynote address at DragCon, my convention that just this past weekend, and I talked about Mother's Day, and I talked about my mother and how she really died of a broken heart. Not my father didn't break her heart. The world broke her heart. She was a sweet, sensitive soul who at 5, she told me, she said, "Ru, don't take life too seriously." And she said, "Ru, you are too sensitive. It took me many years to understand that she was trying to protect me from her own storyline. She didn't want me to be brokenhearted by the world the way she had. I talked about that in the keynote speech. But the biggest hurdle I had to overcome at that age was understanding that the world was hypocritical. You know, as a little boy, I didn't really fit in, and which is nothing new. But I knew I was smart enough to figure out what it would take for me to fit in. So I studied our society. I studied what everybody was doing so I could figure out how to make it work. Mm-hmm. Well, I studied it, and the information I got back from my findings was that it is BS. It's all an illusion. It's hypocritical. It doesn't have, there isn't a standard. It's all superficial. So no, thank you, ma'am. I want nothing to do with your fitting in. So I found a place for myself outside of society. And at 12, I remember watching Monty Python on PBS in San Diego, and I thought, there's my tribe. That's it. The irreverence, the people who are making fun of identity, just in drag. They're out of drag. They're making fun of the Bible. They're making fun of religion. They're making fun of everything. That I knew from that moment on. That's where I belonged.
So you realized early on, and then had it reinforced through psychedelics, that there's more to the world than meets the eye.
Yeah.
At what point did you start formally meditating?
I started formally meditating at 28. There goes those sevens again. It was a really, really, really dark period for me. Dark. I was 28, didn't have a dime.
Pre-fame. World did not know about RuPaul at this point.
That's right. I had some local fame in Atlanta, and I had moved up to New York earlier, the year before that, and couldn't get arrested. Nothing was happening. So through a series of horrible events, I wound up out here in Los Angeles, sleeping on my sister's couch, my baby sister's couch, at 28 years old. And it was horrible. So coming out of that, that's when the meditation started. That's when I attempted to meditate. I really didn't get any good at it until probably about maybe 17 years ago. About 17 years ago, I could get it going.
And what kind of meditation are you doing?
In the morning, my morning routine, I get up very early. I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I get up, I stretch. I'm 55 years old. I got to stretch.
You look great, by the way.
Thank you. I pray. I'm not religious. I'm going to say that again. I'm not religious, but I will pray because the act of prayer deconstructs and overruns the system of my ego. The act of bowing down and physically acknowledging that there's something other than me, and my ego immediately goes away. So I pray, and then I meditate. So my act of meditation is, years ago, someone told me that if you imagine a river that's flowing water by, and those are your thoughts, and that you, the real you, the eternal you, is actually sitting on the bank watching the river go by, and that you have no judgment on those thoughts. You allow them, let them come and go, but you are the awareness of your thoughts. You are not your thoughts. So you can let your thoughts happen. Just know that the real you is the awareness. And that was a major breakthrough for me with meditation. And sort of floating in that place where you can let go of any judgment of what you're thinking is such, oh my God, it's such a sanctuary.
But can you actually, because I have a lot of, I've been meditating only for 7 years, but I have a lot of trouble in getting to that place. I mean, you're describing mindfulness, which is the ability to step out of the stream of our thoughts and view it with some non-judgmental remove. But for me, as a crazy person, I get caught up in those thoughts. A thought floats by on the river, and then I'm off with it.
Sure.
Do you not get lost in that way?
No. Sometimes it'll catch me, and but I just bring myself back. I get caught in it. And that's fine. That's completely fine.
And have you had formal meditation instruction, or because you seem to have? Well, I'll just leave it at that. Have you had formal meditation?
No,
instruction?
not formal. No, I have a meditation group that I go to at 6:30 in the morning. It's actually 5 days a week.
So there's prayer and meditation in your life on a daily basis.
Yes.
And it's remarkable to me, having had on my, having been lucky on my end, having been lucky enough to have a lot of formal meditation training. You're spot on even without it. What you described as just trying to rest in an area that doesn't get caught up in the thoughts, you get caught up, you start again. That is textbook Buddhist meditation. And yet you just, it seems to me that you just kind of came to it on your own.
Well, I didn't come to it on my own. You know, I've always been a seeker, and I've always read books. Even when I was a kid, I would read, growing up in the 70s, there were all these self-help books. And so, I'm from California, I'm from San Diego. So there's this vernacular that I grew up with. And sort of, you know, all roads led to these self-help books, which always sort of, you know, hit upon those elements. So, you know, finding Eckhart Tolle years ago really solidified my practice. I really understood what it meant, and it got me.
So it's interesting that you bring up Eckhart Tolle, because I read Eckhart Tolle was really the start for me of finding meditation too, and I stumbled upon him in 2008 and then went and interviewed him. And but here's my beef with him. I kind of make fun of him a little bit in my book, which is that he and this is not my quote exactly, but a friend of mine has described him as correct about the human situation, but not useful. In that, he doesn't really give you a lot of practical advice for taming the voice in the head or the ego. And so that's my problem with him. It seems like you haven't run into that problem.
Because the solution is this. You allow that voice doesn't go away, by the way. The voice is always there. It's like in this world we live in, there's yin and yang, black and white, male, female. There are these dualities. So that voice, that sort of devil on one shoulder and angel on the other, and then you, the completion of the triad, the consciousness of those two elements, you allow them to exist, but you don't act on them. You know, that voice in my head, it comes up all the time. I say to that voice, I say, thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing. Keep coming back.
What is the difference it's made in your life?
The difference is I'm able to live, I'm able to calm myself. I'm able to not react so drastically to the elements that pop up in life. Traffic, I'm still not so good with. Traffic, that's where the devil on my shoulder really does come up. But what I do is I avoid traffic is my solution to that. But that's what it's done for me. And the bigger one is that in that place, when I find that place where I am the awareness of my thoughts, somehow some divinity, I don't know what it is, I don't need a name for it, some divinity, some clarity comes through. In fact, I can feel my whole body aligning. I can feel my body able to repair itself because the blockage of my thoughts or my past or what I think my future is going to be doesn't exist in this place. And I can feel my body sort of healing itself, repairing itself, being at peace because it doesn't have that blockage. I could be wrong, but that's what I feel like. That's what it's done for me.
I think that's awesome. You know, one of the we talked about this a little bit before we started rolling, but I admit with some embarrassment that before doing my research on you, I really, you know, we all have cultural blind spots. I think of myself as reasonably culturally literate, but the drag world is something that I basically knew nothing about. I certainly knew who you are, but I didn't really know anything about the culture. And reading about you, I realized actually there's for lack of a better word, a major spiritual component to the world of drag. And I just want to read you a quote from you, because I had never realized until I read your now sadly out of print autobiography, Letting It All Hang Out. Is that that's the right name of it? That it is an inner exploration. You say, here I'm quoting, I want to present a whole and complete picture, the yin, the yang, the black, the white, the boy, the girl, the sane, the insane, because we are all every man, a rainbow of different roles and different people. Exploring the colors in myself and in others is my life's passion. There is no such thing as normality. Each and every one of us, if we dare to be whole, is a gorgeous peacock.
Oh, I love that. I haven't read that in 20 years. But that's exactly right. I love that. That's exactly right.
And so you do think of drag as you are, I'll read some more quotes about this, but you are really getting at the mystery of identity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, again, when I was 14 and I realized that it was all a hoax, then that revelation allowed me to have fun with it. The lesson I got from people was that life is not to be taken serious. And that gave me the license to just have fun, play with all the colors. There are no rules. And you will be unchanged. After this body is gone, who you really are is unchanged. It's like, that movie, what was it? Is the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie where the alien comes, a predator, where he comes to, and he has unfortunately, the predator's killing people. We're like that. We come to this planet to experience what it's like to be a human on Earth. Of course, it's once we get here, all these other people say, well, you've got to do this, you've got to do this, you've got to join this club, you've got to be this. And I understood all of those rules as a hoax, as illusion, as something that I don't have to pay attention to. I freed myself of that, which allowed me to go and play with all the colors. Even as a kid, all kids play and they do drag, they cars. I love cars. I do all this. No restrictions. But unfortunately, if you choose that life, there's not a lot of people who do that. Not a lot of people have the chutzpah to live from their heart, to express themselves straight from their desires. Everybody turns into their parents eventually. I don't think I'm not my parents. That's for sure.
Do you, as somebody who is deeply interested in issues of sort of figuring out what this mind and body really is, do you think I am missing out on something because I have never done and probably will never do drag?
I think so. I think that there are aspects of your personality that you don't even know about until you get into drag. I've seen straight men get into drag, and it's interesting to see what they turn into, whether they're, the coy, the coy queen, or the sexy slut queen, or the comedy queen, or the heckler. But what's interesting about that is it's like a guitar playing only one note, or a car that's got a gorgeous, beautiful V8 engine that only goes around the neighborhood. You have to explore this life. You owe it to this gift. And I'm looking at you here. You're gorgeous. You got a sexy little body there, and you got good teeth and good hair. You better go out there. You better drive that car around. Drive down to Baja California. Why don't you?
So there are fundamental aspects of the human experience that I'm missing out on by not exploring all of the colors in the rainbow.
Absolutely.
Within me, is your argument. And what's interesting to me about that is big part, because I feel myself constricting around the idea of dressing up in drag. I don't want to do it. Mm-hmm. But a big part of, and I would call myself a Buddhist, but not a religious one, a big part of Buddhism is letting go.
Yeah.
And it seems to me in my brief exploration of your world that a huge part of drag is letting go.
Absolutely, because and I'm not different from a lot of the kids who come out on RuPaul's Drag Race, or kids who aren't on the show who society has said, we don't want you. Once that happens, then these people are able to explore other avenues and make a place for themselves, and they come to this discovery on their own because they've been cast out, and so I think it's so important to do it. It's almost a gift. It was a blessing for me to be cast out of society. And then, I have a sense, though, most people like yourself don't do it because you're afraid of what other people would think of you.
Sure.
And, when you don't care what other people think of you, that frees you so much. Because, being that kid who was set aside by society, if they don't care about me, I don't have to care about what they think of me. Yeah. So I'm free to do whatever I want. And, if you're afraid of what your mother or your rabbi or the people in the neighborhood are going to say about you, you won't do it.
This may be worth nothing just because it's my opinion, but I will say, just having spent the past hour in your presence, you seem pretty free.
I could be more free. I am pretty free, but I could be more free. I am not that free. I've been with this man for 22 years, but when
Your
I
boyfriend.
was, yeah, when I was, in the clubs and hanging out, people still scared me on an intimate level because being that intimate with people scared me, and it's still scary because people are effing crazy, And also, we talked about this living in New York. I still live there. I live here in New York, LA and New York. I'm a very sensitive person. I've had to be my mother was right. I had to be very careful about it because the people I'm around, I take on their energy. I'm a medium. And I have to be careful of who I allow, and my persona in the media or whatever, even with you, I can protect myself with my persona. But the truth, my real self, I'm very, very sensitive and I'm an introvert. So I said all that to say I'm a free person, but I wasn't very free in terms of like being intimate with people when I was a kid.
You think you've gotten better?
Probably not. With George, he 22 years, I can be myself with him, but it's been very few people I feel like I could do that with.
Academy is a new scripted podcast that follows Ava Richards, a brilliant scholarship student attending Bishop Gray Academy, the country's most exclusive boarding school. Academy takes you into the world of a cutthroat private school where power, money, and sex collide in a game of life and death. Binge all 10 episodes of Academy early and ad-free on Wondery Plus.
What do you think is the role of drag in culture? You've compared it to the shamans, to the witch doctors.
And the court jester.
Yeah.
It's to remind people to not take life too seriously. Not take life too seriously, which is huge.
And by life, you mean sort of the social and cultural constructs that are put upon us.
Exactly. All of that. What people have to say, whether you're driving the right car, do these pants make my ass look fat? And yes, ma'am, it does make your ass look fat, and hallelujah, because I love a fat ass.
Let me ask you about another RuPaul quote. I talk a lot in this podcast and in my book about kindness, not in the sort of empty platitude sense of the term, but as a skill that you can develop. Mm-hmm. And you actually have a great quote about it. You said, being kind illustrates the highest level of consciousness and deliberate optimism. Mm-hmm. Being kind says, I know the material world is an illusion, and I choose to recognize the beauty, innocence, and the source in everyone.
Oh, my God. I haven't heard that in years. I'm tearing up. When hearing that, I haven't read this book since I wrote it. I read it then, but I haven't read it since. That's beautiful because it's the same as the Pollyanna. People thought that Pollyanna was just a dummy because she didn't see the darkness. She saw the darkness. She knows it very well. But she chose to see the beauty in a situation. The child of God is innocent. There's in the Night of the Iguana, the Tennessee Williams play. I know the movie. I've never seen the play. There's a scene where Deborah Carr calms Richard Burton's character, who's going to commit suicide, and she ties him up and gives him some tea that calms him down. And he asks her, "How is it that you know so much about the dark night of the soul?" And she says, "Oh, I know. I call it the Blue Devil. I've been there." And she turns away from him and heads towards the camera. I'm getting choked up thinking about it. And she says, the way that you overcome that dark night is you persevere. You stand in a foundation because those dark clouds will pass. And it's such a beautiful thing because she acknowledges the darkness, but she chooses to stand strong and let it go past her. So with the kindness, it's not being ignorant. It's actually being very aware of what's there and what you do in the face of this darkness. And everybody sees it. Everybody has it. You know, that's the kind of kindness I'm talking about.
It's interesting talking to you and reading what you've written and what you've said, because there's a kind of a dichotomy, because on the one hand you have this very optimistic view about self-improvement. You talk a lot about love in the world, which I want to ask you about. But you also have a kind of fundamentally dark view of the cosmos, too. How do you square that?
Oh, no, because we live in a culture, our world is polar opposites. That's how electricity works. That's how children are created, with a man and a female. I can absolutely love something, love it so much, and at the very same time, hate it, hate it, hate it. That is what we are. And that being in that position is the true existence. There is no it's right or wrong. They coexist at the very same time. I'm acknowledging both. I choose to live in the light. I choose to focus on that the child of God is innocence. But that's not to say that the child of God is not also guilty. Because both are correct. Half full, half empty. Both are correct. One will bring you joy. One will bring you pain.
At the end of every episode of RuPaul's Drag Race, which is now finishing its 8th season and enormously popular, the most popular show on the Logo Network, you say, and I may get this quote incorrect, but if you can't love yourself, how are you going to love somebody else?
Yes.
Is that just a thing you say, or do you actually mean it?
I absolutely mean it. I learned that at 14. It was, all of the things that I talk about on the show, all of the things in the books, these are things I learned at 14. That was my bar mitzvah. That was my breaking through and that was my aha moment. All of these things I understood then. I didn't come up with this stuff. It's not a new philosophy, and I'm not that smart. It's recognizing the tools it takes to navigate this lifetime. Because I was looking for the tools. I thought I could find it in booze and alcohol. I thought I could find it, in becoming famous and rich and famous. None of those things actually do that. They can be fun, but they don't do that. What will do that is understanding fundamentally who you are. Don't forget who you really are. And who you really are, a lot of people aren't ready to hear that. And who you really are is you are God having an excursion in the human body, experiencing life on this planet. And it's very simple. And once you understand that, you think, okay, so how do you want to do this? How do you want to do this? I want to, if I had to, actually, Alan Watts has this thing, this lecture where he talks about, what if you had the ability to choose what your dream was? Every night before you go to bed, you get to choose what your dream was. And then after about of course, you'd be a princess, or you'd be a king, or a He-Man. After about 2 months, you'd be like, that's kind of boring. Why don't we do it random? Why don't we do it random, where I don't know what I'm going to be? Because you know that every morning you wake up, you'd be your old self again. There would be no consequences. You'd be yourself. Well, that's what we're doing. That's what it is. So when you look at it that way, you go, oh, okay, I'm going to be a 6'7" black blonde drag queen who doesn't play by the rules of society or, the Matrix or, all of that stuff. Doesn't do that, but somehow is gonna kick a hole in the whole existence. That's what I want to do. I want to do that.
When you use the word God, what do you mean?
It doesn't have to. I don't know what it is. I don't care. It doesn't matter. It's that thing that cannot be described. That's the thing. It's that thing. I don't know what it is. I don't care. I don't need to know. And
when just let me get back to loving yourself. When you talk about that, what it sounds easier said than done.
Yeah, no,
especially if your parents didn't love you, or the world doesn't love you. How do you actually do that?
It's a practice. You fake it till you make it. It is a practice every day. That's why I first need to disengage my ego in the morning when I pray and when I meditate. I need to first align myself with that thing which cannot be described. Some people call it God. Eckhart Tolle talks about calling it being. because nobody can sort of put a ownership on the word being. First, aligning yourself with that, remembering who you are, who you really are, and you are God's gift to this world is what you are. So start there, and then you go about this life with following your heart, which is like your own GPS system. It's like saying, what do you like? You like dark chocolate, or you like milk chocolate? You like to dance. Do you like to laugh? Well, life has a lot of things. You like water? You want to play with water? So that's where you start. That's how you love yourself. And when you enjoy and follow your own directive, your own GPS system, you can then love yourself and then share that love with other people.
In talking to you, it's clear that you've had these moments of kind of spiritual / psychological breakthroughs at key junctures in your life where things were adverse. 14 when you were having kind of an existential crisis, 28 when you hadn't yet made it and were sleeping on your sister's couch. And then there was another one in kind of in the year 2000 where you were already famous, world famous, and you sort of stepped out of the public view. Why did you do that, and what were the contents of that crisis?
Well, it's important for any artist to step away from the canvas. And in fact, during the Bush era, the second Bush era, the feeling in our culture was there was a certain hostility out there, and I felt like I had to defend my life in interviews or in just in the public. So I thought, you know what, I need to step back. I need to quit drinking, and I need to reconnect with myself. And I moved out here. I still had the place in New York, but I moved to LA, and I had parties, daytime parties. I did quit drinking and doing drugs, and got to know my nieces and nephews, and just got to see myself again. Because I'm ambitious, and for all those years, I hit the big time, and I just worked all the time. So I needed to do that, and in fact, George and I had a little meltdown of our relationship, and of course we've repaired it now, but all of those things happened. And looking back, I realized I needed to do that to understand why I do what I do. In fact, up until that point, my thinking was, if I got rich and famous, that will fill that hole, that void in my life. Well, of course, at the end of, when I realized that wasn't the case. But I got into therapy. I got closer into what made me tick, right? So what you're hearing are people outside of.
Yeah, there are people outside the window saying that's RuPaul, and you're not in drag.
Well, they know me from the TV show Out of Drag. But looking back at that period, it was so good for me to take time away, because what changed, there's a siren going on. We're actually it's at Hollywood and Highland here in Los Angeles, where the pop-up store is. So good for me to do that, because when I came back, my motivation had to do with love and music and laughter. Before, when I wanted to become famous, I kind of wanted my father's approval. I really did. But I understood after many years that he couldn't see me. He couldn't see me even if there was no way. It wasn't possible for him to see me.
Is he around still?
No, he's dead. Both my parents are dead.
Did you ever get his approval?
When you make a lot of money, all sins are forgiven.
Yeah. That's not real approval.
That's not real approval. No, it's not. It's not. And I really understood that he was a figment of my imagination. I have a vast imagination. So I imagine that his betrayal of me, his abandonment of me.
He left the home when you were 7 or something?
7, yeah. But he was really never there. I thought that it was a malicious, thought out, well-plotted attack on me. It wasn't. It had nothing to do with me. So it took that time away to understand that. So when I did come back, I came back with a movie called Star Booty. Don't watch it. It's a totally rated X. It's a sort of John Waters movie that I produced and starred in. It's fabulous, but by the way, I came back with that. I came back in 2004 with a radio, morning drive radio at WNEW in New York, and and then all of those things led to Drag Race.
RuPaul, you're a fascinating dude. I've learned a lot from you. As we wind down here, any words of wisdom you want to share with either me or the audience?
Yeah, here's some words of wisdom. Don't wear high heels in soggy grass. It's a bad idea.
Okay, all right, duly noted. Anything else that I should know?
Well, it's important to live your life. I know that you're afraid of drag. I don't wonder if it's more that you're afraid of what your wife will think and your children, or if it's that you'll love it so much you won't come back.
I don't know. I feel like it's the former, but I don't want to be closed-minded and say it's not the latter. I feel like it's the former.
Oh my God, could you imagine you not coming back?
That would require some pretty drastic changes in my life.
No, or not.
Well, it would certainly be a negotiation with my wife.
Well, no, listen, it's the 21st century. Maybe she could do it too. Maybe it's a drag family. Drag family that's, a family that drags together is a family that slays together.
All right, okay. I'll go home and discuss this with Bianca and see how it flies. I'll let you know. I'll send you an email. Or maybe I'll advise her never to listen to this particular podcast. All right, there's another edition of the 10% Happier podcast. If you like it, I'm going to hit you up for a favor. Please subscribe to it, review it, and rate it, preferably 5 stars. I want to also thank the people who produce this podcast, Josh Cohan, Lauren Efron, Sarah Amos, and the head of ABC News Digital, Dan Silver. And hit me up at Twitter, Dan B. Harris. See you next time. Hey, Prime members. You can listen to 10% Happier early and ad-free on Amazon Music. Download the Amazon Music app today. Or you can listen early and ad-free with Wondery Plus in Apple Podcasts. Before you go, do us a solid and tell us all about yourself by completing a short survey at Wondery.com/survey.